morning, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing great, Randy. How about yourself?
Great. A couple of weeks ago, you posted on our Marching Arts Educators Facebook page for folks to make suggestions, of topics
Yeah.
that we could talk about. And we heard from a friend and colleague from Indiana who's now retired with his lovely wife down in Florida. I'm real jealous, actually,
Yeah, really.
able to do that. But Dan Burton texted us and said, hey, here's an idea for a topic, because he's actually doing some outreach, some educational outreach with young teachers down in Florida to try to help mentor. And he said, something about this concept of the role of organization and setting high expectations and mental focus in a rehearsal setting as maybe a topic that we could talk about, particularly possibly with younger teachers who haven't been on the podium for a long period of time, and particularly ones that might be in challenging situations where they have moved into a position where it's been a revolving door, or they've moved into a position where there was a guy or a lady that was there for a long period of time as the director of bands, for 30 or 40 years, and they're trying to replace this person. But those extenuating circumstances of how to basically have high expectations, but doing it in an endearing way, how to create mental focus in the rehearsal, and how to have those organizational skills that are going to allow you to be successful in the classroom. Because sometimes with younger teachers, the organizational skills is what potentially could get them in trouble really quickly with maybe an administrator or a parent. So let's unwrap that today.
Sure. It's a tough situation for the young teachers. I mean, I still remember how I thought I knew everything when I went in and started teaching, and then realized very quickly that I knew nothing. And it's a tough situation to be in. And I think I'd have a couple suggestions thinking back, and also thinking with some of the teachers that I've mentored recently. First of all, you got to breathe. You got to stay calm, and don't overreact to things. Make sure that you have time to sit down and actually think through your process. Like, what is your methodology for keeping your classroom organized? And what is your process for keeping your kids calm and under control so you can have a great teaching situation, regardless of the type of students you have? We all have different kinds of students. We'll have those who will fall right in line with what the program needs, and then we'll have others who will drive us crazy, at times. But I think it's a matter of us having time to think. That may sound kind of silly, but I think a lot of times young teachers start to make decisions kind of on the run, and they do things, they make decisions as things are happening instead of really thinking through the process. And I think that could help if you have a plan in your mind that, when you walk into the class, what's the first thing that you want to talk to about them? What's the first thing that you want to have happen? And the other thing that I would say is consistency. Whatever you decide on, you have to be consistent. And I used to make fun, Randy, and I'm just being, again, totally transparent here. I used to make fun of teachers who had the kids do the exact same thing every day when they came into the room. I thought that was kind of treating kids like babies a little bit. But the more I've been in this profession, the more I've seen why that's important. And it makes kids calmer, and it gives them a sense of safety, if you will, I think. And so I would say to the younger teachers, be consistent with your plan. And then if something doesn't work for a week or two, you can adjust it. You can adjust things. But go in trying to be as consistent as you can from day to day with your kids so they know what's expected. It doesn't mean they're going to always agree with it, but at least let's have that consistency. Then you can talk with them about these kind of things. You can talk about with your administrators about it, etc. But I would say, number one, stay calm, think through things. And number two, be consistent.
Yeah, that's great advice. And, engagement happens because we have a purpose for what we're doing. And so, often we don't get past the what. If we can get to the why, then that automatically validates. And then I know you do this when you teach, because I've watched you teach, you ask a lot of questions. And so getting them engaged in the process, in doing so with questions, having them listen to each other, whatever it is. And there's a little bit of fake it till you make it there. I know that all of us as young teachers struggled with looking at a 16 stave score while listening, while conducting, and then stopping and knowing what to say in the most economical fashion possible so that the students wouldn't start talking, and then moving on. And I almost think sometimes it's better to not conduct at all and to not look at the score at all and to just listen.
Yeah.
Because, that's at least going to help you develop your ears more. I think a lot of younger teachers struggle with that, not knowing what to say.
Right.
And taking way too long to say it. And as Shirley mentioned in our webinar a couple of weeks ago, this idea that reps are not a good thing is bad. I mean, they need their reps. So there's no harm in letting them do it again or a couple of times. Let me hear that again. Let me hear that again. Let me hear that again, as opposed to standing there and talking, for 5 minutes and never really making a point.
Absolutely. And I think doing those reps, and then at the end of those reps, asking your students what they felt individually or what they felt about the ensemble. As you just mentioned, a great way to keep them engaged. I really believe in the question thing. And the reason I brought up the calmness earlier is because as you were talking just now, talking about going through some of those things as a beginning teacher in front of your band, that's something that I didn't do well. I panicked a little bit. If people would start talking, if people are not paying attention, if I felt like I didn't have control of the room. And then I would start to tend towards the negative side. And now, of course, I wouldn't do that. I'd have a whole different process after all these years, of learning this. But I think that's another thing to think about just staying in control, keeping your thoughts together, keeping your mind calm. And I think what you said about the questions is so important. It's a great way to get your kids engaged.
Yeah, and the other piece too, I used to tell student teachers, don't be a prisoner of the podium. Don't feel like you are sequestered on that podium.
Right.
Move around the room. Proximity speaks to anyone that may not be focused.
Yep.
Particularly with younger groups, a freshman band or an 8th or 7th grade band,
Yep.
Moving around the room and being engaged maybe with your instrument, or, you don't have to be on that podium. There's not a geographical limitation to where you need to be in the room while you're instructing. I think it's, and I even do this when I do presentations sometime, and I warn people, I'm a walker. I cannot stand standing behind a lectern for a long period of time.
Me either.
And I think it keeps people engaged a little bit more, and for students, I think it allows them to understand that, you're listening to them. And like you said, having them engage in the problem solving is really, really important. I mean, if you treat every ensemble as a problem solving session, then why wouldn't you want to engage your performers and your students in that process? There are things that they're going to know. Kids are pretty smart. They're pretty smart.
And the other thing that I might mention before we go here, Randy, too, is that the whole idea of talking too much that you mentioned, I think is a good thing to think about too, because I know a lot of times I get better control of the group by just stopping. If I feel like something's not going or someone's not behaving the way I'd like for them to, or they're not engaged, I'll just stop. And I'll just literally get off the podium and I'll walk back a couple steps and I'll just turn around and look at the group. And it's pretty amazing how they're like, uh-oh. And I don't even say a word, and I'll just get back on the podium and start again. And they know exactly why I did what I did. And I don't have to be negative about it. I don't have to say anything negative, but they get the message, And the other thing I would say too, for young teachers, if you're going to have a student challenge you, do it outside of the rest of the classroom. Even if you have to ask someone to leave the classroom, do that rather than do something like that in front of the entire class, because nothing will mess up the trust or ruin the feeling between you and the students than if you have a one-on-one with a student who's not behaving. So just think carefully about that as well, and try to, we always hear the whole idea of, compliment in front of the group, and if you have to do something negative, do it in person, away from the group. So just something to think about there as well.
Yeah, great advice, Richard. And thanks everyone for joining us this week on Coffee Talk, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Take care, everyone. Good luck.